good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is a pleasure to be here. And I'm hoping if I just jump across one, you'll be able to see my nice starter for 10 introduction for you all, talking about how AI is reshaping the role of the teacher. I feel like I've got a little bit of a green light today as a keynote for us to fly upwards a little bit and take a slightly broader view of what some of the driving forces are that are impacting the change in education, which links in really well with some of the topics that are being covered. I like to set the tone. You'll notice on your screens there's a picture of not just me, but two assistants, my furry friends, Ferdy and Harris. And if you follow any of the resources I share, my newsletter on a regular basis, you'll see that I like to keep things human. They are my well-being assistants. And I very much think that the most important conversation around AI is making it simple and accessible for everybody. We all need to be part of the conversation. So with that in mind, a very brief introduction. Kirsten very kindly has shared some lovely words there. I like to describe myself as a man of many hats, chair of a multi-academy trust in the UK, 30-plus year EdTech CEO. I work with the Department for Education, supporting academies and schools across the east of England. And then I also have roles working with Foundation for Education Development, British Education Suppliers Association, and lots more. Things that keep me interested, focused, and passionate around all things education and digital and the fusion between the two. And occasionally, when I think I'm probably getting to the point where I'm going to forget stuff, I try and write books that focus the topic in a conversational way to make it accessible and fun for folks. So please do check out some of my more recent tomes. We are moving at pace. So obviously today I am very excited. And if you didn't know I was excited, that little animation was to give you a clue for today's conversation. And I did include the fact that some fab folks talking today. So do make sure you stick around even after my session to make sure you listen to some of the fab ones that are coming up. There's some amazing lineup for you there. So we've got quite a lot to talk about in a relatively short period of time. So I'm going to go at a fair pace. As always, anything I share will be something that will be available at the end for you. There are a few slides that have got a little marker on them saying they're just resources. So don't focus too much at the time. They're there as takeaways because I think you can never share too much, and I'd rather overshare than undershare. But let's talk about digital and AI, and naturally in this context, how it feeds into the role of educator. I use this word cloud quite regularly because as a general rule, when I start a CPD or an inset session with a group of leaders in a school or a cluster of schools, and I say we're going to talk about a digital strategy, the role of AI, half the room go, come on now, this is going to be exciting. It's going to be innovative. It's going to be a chance for us to talk about new, engaging, purposeful things. And the other half of the room say, oh no, this is not what we need right now. I haven't got the capacity, the time. It's not my area of expertise. I feel intimidated by it. I've got to tip something out of the cup before I put something else in. And they're all healthy emotions. The biggest challenge when it comes to AI is the fear of something that we don't understand. And the more we get confidence using the tools, seeing the purposeful impact that we'll talk about, the more we build up the ability to then use our professional judgment for when the time is right and when the time isn't to use those tools. Again, I'm going to reiterate throughout the journey, but rest assured, my view is AI built into our digital tools, when used with purpose, is about freeing up time so we have more human-to-human time in the classroom. This is not a replace. This is an enabler, a tool to allow us to have more human-to-human interaction. So are we just talking about AI or the topics that are accelerated by AI? Now, as it's a keynote, I wanted to go a little bit broader because there's an easy persuasion to say, well, when we talk about artificial intelligence, the conversation is a technical one, right? Well, actually, the bigger conversation happening and the source of one of the main chapters in my new book, The Awkward Questions in Education, was that it really isn't. It's been an enabler for a much bigger conversation. The world is changing, the workplace is changing, the workplace is looking for people with a very specific set of skills and a changing set of skills. And AI has been an enabler for a significant shift in the broader workplace. And the bigger significant shift is that for the first time, what we're looking for is a change in mindset from purely looking for people with the most academic skills to recognizing that those soft skills have become power skills. The skills we talk about, whether it's communication skills, critical thinking skills, cognitive skills, creativity, imagination, all the things that actually differentiate us from technology. And you'll see in the corner there, your little cartoon Al on his roadmap journey along the way with us today. And one of the projects that I co-chaired with Michael Stevenson from the OECD was Educating for Human Flourishing. And the OECD taking that next step, which is looking and moving from the traditional 16-year-old PISA rankings, a snapshot in time of students very much focused around STEM subjects, to looking at an education system that promotes human flourishing. In other words, one that promotes, a lovely phrase that I love to share from that work, promotes human flourishing, one that enables a sense of awe and wonder, appreciation for the arts, music, literacy, innovation, so many other strands as well. And if we think of it within the context of AI being an enabler to the most rich and productive human resources, then I feel it becomes slightly less of a fearful entry, something less of a barrier, but some more a focus around an opportunity. And within that, the OECD really focuses around some of those strands around workplace and culture. And culture is a really important one because we know that the future workplace is looking for more AI-based skills. And that doesn't diminish the requirement for our educational skills, but it does change and shift the balance between what do we need to learn and use and acquire during our educational journeys versus what does the workplace actually want for us. And maybe that sparks a whole different conversation around the merits of assessment and our curriculum design for teachers, between are we teaching young people the context that they need, but not enough on the skills they need to acquire alongside. After all, the content plus the skills fundamentally is the foundations for agency for our learners. So there's a very much a move when it comes to recognizing a change for what we need to equip our young people for the future. It seems a strange moment to introduce a clumsy bird, but certainly when we think around the world, there is absolutely a move. And I use and reference a Chinese proverb, which is roughly translated, a clumsy bird can reach the forest first. And what does that mean? Well, historically, I'm going to use, again, exaggerate for effect, so bear with me on my little high-level journey around some of the changes happening. If we think about Western cultures, we pretty much work on the mindset that the most academic and able child will be the most successful in life. They will pass through education, they will go on to their further education, and then they will be successful in life. And there's been traditionally in Eastern culture, which is actually, it's all about how hard you work, how much effort you put in, and following that parallel, a clumsy bird, perhaps not the fastest flying bird, can be the one that reaches the forest first. And now what we're seeing a shift is that actually, it's not the most academic child that will be most successful in life. It will be the child with the broadest set of skills, the ones that differentiate them from technology, the machine in their future workplace. So I would argue we've kind of removed the glass ceiling and we've leveled the playing field, that there's opportunity for all to be most successful in life. And that becomes a really powerful conversation point when we start thinking about what's happening in the broader landscape for education. Maybe it flips it on the head there and it turns the system upside down when we start thinking about knowledge, skills, and assessment. You know, most of our education systems, when it comes to the most important qualifications, our degrees are systems that were defined 150 years ago and were intended to be front doors for those that achieve a certain academic level. Now we see a flip where we have a much broader way of accessing education. So before we kind of dive into the teacher specific bit, what I wanted to really focus on was recognizing the changing role of the teacher, the topic that you've already had conversation points around. And for some schools, the conversation starts with, yeah, technology is going to replace the teacher, isn't it? Well, no, I certainly hope never, never, never. And anybody who understands the dynamic of that teacher-student role will understand that technology is never going to be that place. But there is conversations around things like the sage on the stage versus the guide on the side. Is there an opportunity to work and utilize technology? Absolutely there is, where it can be used and the human can be the person that actually helps to direct and support along that journey with those tools. I mentioned on my little screen there, 2 Sigma. And for many of you, in fact, probably all of you involved in education, you will be familiar with Benjamin Bloom and Bloom's taxonomy when we talk about education. But perhaps less of you will be familiar with some of Bloom's other works, including Bloom's 2 Sigma problem from the 80s, which in essence, was how does a child that is one-to-one taught achieve 2 standard deviations greater output in their examinations than a class of 30 children? That idea that one-to-one tuition provides a direct advantage. Now, the truth of it is, it wasn't the most compelling research in terms of the size of the cohort, but it posed a question. And I would argue for the first time ever, there is a compelling way that gap can be mitigated to a degree. Because for the first time, utilizing technology, we have the potential and the opportunity to provide personalized learning pathways, personalized learning assistance, tutors, in a digital sense alongside our human teacher that allows a child to have more focused and nurtured coaching where relevant, and also curriculum resources that become more adapted. So for the first time, we're seeing that role of the teacher becoming something where they're not just the sole deliverers of content, but they're absolutely the curator of those meaningful learning experiences, the facilitator of inquiry, creativity, deeper thinking, lots of other bits. They become the coach and the mentor. I say become, haven't they always been? Again, sometimes it's about more time and opportunity to focus on some of the challenges in our classrooms, like social emotional learning and development, and also being the enabler for deeper thinking, orchestrating personalized and project-based learning. Is it a surprise that we see so much more personalized and project-based learning over the last 18 months, 2 years, as we grapple with what does assessment look like in an age of digital assistance for our learners? It's, again, not surprising, but we also need that person that signposts whether it's the ethical guide to our digital landscape. So start thinking digital citizenship, something that we try to weave into our curriculum, but rarely get opportunity to do on a fuller basis. So there's all loads of things there we want to think about. And the most important thing is to be able to say it and actually give permission. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? I speak to school leaders, some very highly experienced school leaders of big clusters of schools, who will say to me on a phone call, whispering, "Oh, I've been using this AI tool and it's really cool." And I will ask the question, why are you whispering? Well, it feels like I'm cheating. And that's half the problem. Do we think using tools is cheating? Or do we think it is exactly that, a tool that allows us to use our professional judgment when we take it out of the toolbox and use our professional judgment on the output it crafts for us and when and where it is appropriate. And if we keep that microphone, that mindset, we keep that focus on the idea that this is about adding confidence and tools to the toolkit, then suddenly we can embrace some of the opportunities for the amazing technology and resources that are available. Probably said enough on that point. Again, you'll see high quality graphics at all stages. I apologize if I presented this one and assumed that you were all 7, but it does hopefully signpost the point with Ferdinand, my little dog, on the picture there, which is thinking about some of the core principles for AI in education. Again, central to AI design and deployment, should not enhance but or replace the role of teachers. Again, pretty much a case of it's there to support, not substitute. And we make sure that work in low-tech settings as well. Things I'm always really mindful of when it comes to equity. You know, the first thing is some of the best lessons involve no technology whatsoever, and long may that be the case. But also there's been a mindset for many, many years that technology has been an iterative process every year with more and more functionality and features. And we find that actually the technology enhances the digital divide within our classrooms by limiting the access for some of our learner cohorts. The decisions we take about the use of technology should be that they're accessible and inclusive to all of our learners and all of our staff. And that's why when I see fantastically co-produced solutions like the one that you're seeing today with the team at Toddle, it absolutely is about bringing that equity and that context back into the way that we deliver our resources. Now, I have got quite a lot of slides, so I'm going at a fair pace, but let's be bold and say the reason I'm here and sharing with you at that high level is because there are significant opportunities. And we work in a landscape where, for the right reasons, always the right reasons, the word that always comes before the word edtech or should is evidence-informed. What we don't want is the new shiny. What we want is tools that are evidence-informed on the basis that we can measure impact within our classrooms, within our schools. The one thing to be mindful of, folks, and I will come on to it later on, is what's our measure of impact? Because we've been pre-programmed in education to always measure impact. Positive outcomes must be attainment, progress, some measure of a child's curriculum journey and their attainment. But in reality, the pressures on our education systems around the world are often about teacher workload, recruitment and retention, inclusivity, getting learners engaged in our curriculum. There's actually far many more different measures. And it starts often with reducing workload for our teachers. That might help when it comes to retention of teachers, preventing burnout. It might help just allowing them to be available for that greater, broader nurture, supporting with planning, personalization, time, and so on. And that's the bits that we're going to focus on around a broader story about thinking about that role as a teacher. Let's also make sure that our guiding light, the golden thread that runs throughout this when it comes to the role of the teacher, is always about how we can hold on to and develop that human connection. Empathy, emotional intelligence, that support of mentorship and moral guidance, trust and care in the classroom. Teacher is and always will be a relationship-based profession. So we can talk about technology all day long. We can talk about some of the amazing innovations in AI. And you know what? We're going to. But never forget, this is not about instead of. This is always about as well as an empowerer. And we're heading down my little journey before we get into some of the details of a step-by-step thinking about that evolution from start to the end of the year as a teacher with AI and academic tools. We need to be really mindful of those metrics, that we're not just thinking about the tool and AI and its impact purely on learner outcomes, although that's really important too, right? I might have a different view when it comes to the breadth of our curriculum and suitability, but depends where we are in the world, and we will all have our own perspectives. But we do need to be mindful of some of those new metrics, the things that are really important to us right now. Like I've said, the time saved, the engagement, the support, the attendance, recruitment, all those other factors. So we can be a bit of a lighthouse, a beacon when it comes to AI leadership. At the top of our organizations, our leaders need to be the ones that not just set the what we plan to do and how we plan to do it, but most importantly, talk about the why. And I don't wish to be ageist to any of the audience, and I've got sufficient grey hair that I can get away with being slightly ageist. But often our leaders in our educational organizations do not have the best lived experience and confidence to be leading the discussion around AI and digital within our schools. It actually takes strength of leadership to delegate to middle leaders and other staff who've come into our organization that have experience using digital tools in different ways to empower innovation as being something that's allowed and that's supported. So that's something that's really, really important, that we make sure as leaders that we're showing that kind of mentorship and empathy, but also empowering our staff on a journey, but also setting the direction of travel in what we want within our schools. And with that in mind, those are all the things that I've just been talking about in a very kind of pictorial way. Being purposeful, embracing innovation, keeping teachers at the heart, investing in a vision, focusing on our why collectively, not just what we can do and how we can do it, why we're doing it, what are we trying to mitigate, recognizing that it's okay to talk more about skills, how those soft skills become more important, how we're flipping the curriculum upside down, and much more. And we can't do too much in 45 minutes, but we can certainly try and fix the world. So there's a little infographic for you to take forward. But what might we do? What could we think about if we walked into our schools? Now, I sometimes say, because I get a little bit carried away, to be honest, if I was head of education for the globe and I started again, I probably wouldn't start with bricks and mortar, because I couldn't possibly around the planet give equity of access. I'd start with putting a device in every child's hand and make sure that everybody has access to high quality education. And then I'd create the places and spaces to allow students and young people to come together for those really important bits. And in the same way, when it comes to thinking about that journey of delivering AI in our schools, we don't just say it's the start of the academic year, we're using this tool and happy days. We start by setting the scene, identifying the foundations that we build upon, what our priorities are within our school, what the opportunities are, how it can be used purposefully, but also we're mindful of the risks. We set our AI policy tenets to empower our teachers and learners to be the guides. We find and empower our teaching staff, again, as part of our role to test and evaluate tools to make sure that they're the right fit. We become the owners, the human in the loop, the feedback loop of what worked well and what doesn't work well. And again, it can only be teachers at the heart. Teachers need to embrace and be the leaders of this innovation. And then we constantly rinse and repeat and adapt our strategy. No one size fits all. Every school's different. So I want to make sure that we empower teachers to be really part of the the leaders on how we use AI within our schools, but more importantly, within the classroom. And you can see along there how I kind of put teachers running very much along 7 or 8 of those main steps. Again, from a visual perspective, start with the purpose, why it matters. We're then going to do the adoption and how it sits on our infrastructure. Every school is unique. Identify your local focus. Then we're going to talk about caution, principles, how we test, and so on. You can see them on the screen, so there's no need to read them all out. But you know, the funniest thing is when we walk in a school, maybe a clusters of schools, and it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, the first question should be for all of us. It's whether you're a teacher, a teaching assistant, whether you're a school leader, whether you're a system leader, where are we at right now? Where are our schools? Because if we want to define our why, surely we need to know where we're at the moment. And I often say there are kind of 4 key stages, and this is from Sir David Carter's book and something that I think is really, really important when we look at our schools, which is, are we here to try and stabilize? Are we trying to actually improve, support a school that has challenges? And one of the levers we can pull is technology, AI, and digital to support our teaching and learning. Are we perhaps, in a more practical sense, moving on from that kind of stabilize to repair, where we're actually looking to fix and move things along? Are we moving to an improve, where we're on a journey where we're trying to improve both quality of teaching and learning, behavior and other standards in our school? Or are we in sometimes what actually is thought to be easy, but one of the hardest ones, which is, are we in the sustain mode when it comes to? And I've just given a few kind of key pointers there that sit under those steps. But if we're setting the scene and we're starting our journey with a why in terms of using technology in the classroom to underpin and enhance teaching and learning, then don't we have to start, first of all, with where we're at as a school and what we're trying to achieve? It doesn't matter what status school you are, where you are around the world. I think there's always a sense of, do we all, if we sat around the table collectively as different stakeholders in a school, have the same sense of where we are? And if we have a sense of where we are or where we want to be, and let's be honest, we're all on a journey. None of our schools are perfect. I'm chair of a multi-academy trust in the east of England, in Peterborough. We have a cluster of schools. We have our next new school being built and will open next year. And every school when it opens is full of opportunity and it's full of challenge, and it's finding the journey that makes sure that we build on the right pathway. And it's the same if your school's been around 100 years or 100 hours. So let's be really mindful that before we go on that stepping stones, the first step is about setting the scene. And rest assured, you'll see the summary there. I see someone's asking for the improved slide again. They'll all be shared at the end from the Fab team Toddle, so you can have a look yourself and you can see the steps as we go along that journey. But step 1, let's set the scene. As teachers, as school system leaders, let's be really mindful of where we are right now. All the amazing resources and sessions and workshops you've got today are all about empowering and using impactful tools, but they have so much purpose and context if we can set our why that sits around them. The next step from there is about the foundations and the mindset of our organizations. Again, sometimes we need to give that green light to our educators to say, this is part of the changing role for teachers and leaders, encompassing our long-term goals and ambitions, setting out our strategy, making sure we have a climate that is there to support, conducive to exploration and learning, that we focus on our purpose, our voice, the things that really resonate with us. I sometimes ask the question, what is a good school? And if I'm asking it from an academic perspective, I normally get told, 85% of our students hit grade X or Y, and 70% of our students are higher than this. And then if I ask a teacher or somebody who really is within the school system, tell me about your school, they'll say, well, it's a place where we support every child's perspectives. We're all about breadth of our curriculum and learning offer. It's all about empowering our children with the right skills. There's a real disconnect between us actually sitting down and being clear about what the mindset is of our organization. And that might seem a bit funny, but why wouldn't that be a driver for the technology we choose? And then we have our co-production mindset that sits around that. And the co-production bit, again, this adapts all the time, and I'm going to come on to some more AI specific bits. But I think the key one I think about here is at the heart of co-producing, and this is where the shifting role of teachers are now, is teachers and students, and when it comes to age and stage, parents, are at the heart of our conversation. They're at the central point that shape the why. Why do we want to look for new tools? How are we adapting our curriculum, our teaching and learning offer? But you can see in my Any Excuse for a Brightly Coloured Venn diagram, there's lots of stakeholders that sit around there. Our senior leadership team will have our school development plan, our self-evaluation frameworks, our areas for development, our priorities for the next year that will feed into some of the things we might do first. Our network and IT team gets a bit boring, but we've got to make sure we're not building on sandy land. The foundations that allow us to innovate and bring new technology on without breaking stuff. And we can't talk about technology, we can't talk about AI, but reminding ourselves about data privacy, what's gathered, where's it stored, how long is it stored for, who has access. But we think and mindful about accessibility and our children with special educational needs and disabilities, that we can differentiate our resources. Great example of where Toddle's really, really strong. We can create and support further evolution of our lesson plans and resources. But we're always mindful of safeguarding and digital citizenship, that our governance, our oversight continually checks the what are we trying to achieve, how are we doing it, and what does the measure of success look like. Bearing in mind whether we're talking about implementing a really well evidenced platform like Toddle or something completely new, it's really important that we have that check and balance of what does a measure of success look like. I would always argue it's better to do a few things well, embed them and generate evidence than to try and do lots of things. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've mentioned finance on a slide when we were getting all excited, then the money has to come in. I'm going to be really, really direct here. Finance should not dictate the choices we make in terms of the right tools. It might dictate the speed of the journey, but it absolutely shouldn't direct the direction of travel. And then the important one, which probably could be a big circle around the outside, is about training and professional development, which really is a constant one. And I've used it at a few different events, but I often do say sometimes we think of within our school organisations for teachers that our professional development is a one-off inset at the start of the academic year and you're on your own. And I use the analogy and say, well, I don't expect that Manchester United in the English Premier League have training session at the start of the season and then nothing till the cup final. Now, in reality, that's not the case, but that's why days like today and many of the events that are laid on are really, really important, because professional development is about two things. It's about acquiring new skills and knowledge, and it's also about connecting with the right people who are on a similar journey where you can share the challenges, the ups and the downs. And so I want to bring that together as we go on to our priorities and say, well, here's the things that tend to resonate right now that I'm hearing when it comes to priorities. We're talking about educational technology. We're talking about the P that sits before it, pedagogy-led educational technology. We're talking about AI, not AL, sadly, but AI. We're talking about data, and we're also talking about skills. Now, I just want to pause there. That's the nature of the conversation that I'm talking about today with that shifting role of teachers. Be under no illusion, actually, the thing that we're really talking about the most at the front door of our schools is about social, emotional, mental health, well-being, getting our young learners into school, attendance, all sorts of other challenges that sit around the social fabrics of support we provide and nurture in our schools. But within the digital journey, those are the hot topics. And within that, AI is the one that's really leading. And I suppose the first thing that is picked up from stats, this is a report by Clever in 2024, the Classroom in the Future report, was highlighting something that I suspect many of you will go, duh, I guess that already, Al, which is actually there's a lot more confidence for new first-year teachers when it comes to AI-powered tools than it is for teachers who've been teaching for 15 years. And I'm not sure why we're surprised by that. Ironically, when it comes to the advent of new technology and innovation, experience in the profession doesn't really count for much because the technology is so brand new. What is clear is that with the right professional development, then the experienced teachers will find the ways to use it more purposefully and with more impact. But it highlights the need to continue these kind of conversations and the detailed workshops so we build our confidence at all stages of teaching journey to use the tools more effectively. And we have a constant journey in terms of we can see a progression of our teachers prepared. I think we're very fortunate today that we've got loads of folks who are really keen and clearly focused on developing their professional understanding and skill set. But I've spoken at events full of system leaders where I've said, so we're all confident with the basics of AI, and everyone's nodded and gone, And then the very first thing I've showed using a simple AI tool, everyone's dashed for their pen and paper to make notes. And the truth is there's lots of folks who are really comfortable with AI, based nothing more than a conversation they've heard. And we need to give people the power to try and develop their skills by experiencing and practicing use. But it's really important to see there's a journey there, and we've still got lots more to do. So that very much ties into, how we empower our learners in this age of AI. I'm really mindful that actually the role of the teacher in this new AI world is shifting, and it's shifting to require them to be an oracle of even more knowledge than ever before. But it has to start. There has to be a reality check, which is we actually need to educate and empower our staff first, to then give them the confidence to start talking about the things that are most important. And here you can see a summary here, which is from the OECD, Empowering Learners in the Age of AI, where it really focuses around those core areas when it comes to AI literacy. Everything from the things that are most obvious to us to thinking about how we have the conversation around ethics and fairness and bias, how we think about the digital literacy we have, how we think about media literacy, and the conversation goes on. But it's really, really important that we start to weave that into our professional development. Here's a little picture that I often use from the lovely Sylvia Duckworth, who does her sketchnoting books. If you haven't come across Sylvia Duckworth's books, you really should, but she's way better at sketching than me, so she's very kindly lets me use them in a number of my books. But really talking about maybe why we're here today, but when it comes to the role of AI and digital in our schools, it's about how we build confidence. It starts with that survival mode, which I guess is a bit like walking into a strange classroom with a strange set of devices and being told, there are your learners, off you go, to developing confidence and mastery in how we use our tools. Building confidence and mastery in using Toddle and other solutions is a great example, because the more we develop and play with the tools and understand their capabilities, the more likely we are to have impact, where our students and staff are using the technology effectively, and it becomes embedded in lessons and planning where appropriate. And we move to that bit that we're all trying to achieve, which is innovation, where the use, as it says there, is persuasive and we're digitally literate, but it's being driven by a pedagogical need for how the technology is used. So our journey is always about building confidence. And I like this little summary because I thought it tied in very nicely from ResearchGate, which is the most preferred AI training methodologies for teachers. And you can see that a large slice of that is workshops, online courses, webinars, one-to-one coaching, peer mentoring. And we probably tick quite a few of those slices of the pie today, depending on how you want to define it. But fundamentally, we're all in the same boat. And somehow it's empowering to know that everybody's on a journey, everybody's working along. But what we also can do as we move along at pace is recognize that with the opportunity for AI and with that evidence informed, we are not at a blank canvas. AI has been around a long time. In fact, whilst ChatGPT and other tools may have brought it to the fore a few years ago, non-generative AI has been in personalized learning platforms and tools for much, much longer. And beyond that, has been used for all sorts of things, including scanning millions of records of data and sending a letter to me and saying, Mr. Kingsley, based on your height and weight, you probably should be due a checkup. But the point is, within the classroom, within our evidence, there are opportunities for us to actually look and say, well, we know there's evidence of how AI can be positive and be used as a personalized learning platforms for AI tutors, can benefit some of our students with different learning needs. It absolutely exists and has become embedded when it comes to text-to-speech and other assistive technologies that are really helpful. And obviously quite recently, we've got on-the-fly translation in conversations, which is great for children that have, in the UK, English is additional language, but wherever you are in the world, meeting the needs of our learners. When we think about how it can be used flexibly for real-time language learning, I remember back doing a connected classrooms project between the UK schools we have in Peterborough and a cluster of schools in Kenya. And at that time, we were using Skype and were amazed when about a minute later, it would take some text that had been written in one language and translate it. And here we are now connecting and allowing conversations in multiple languages in real time. And alongside that, we absolutely are seeing tools that will speed up that feedback loop, doing our real-time assessment, providing us with much clearer formative assessment and feedback to our learners. And so there are all areas where we can build confidence, knowing that the platforms, when used with purpose and being mindful what we share and how we use them, can really have a positive impact. This is something I just shared from a slide. This is back from a conference that I spoke at with Laura Knight, EduTech Europe last year. But the reason why I just shared it was because I think we all recognize this curve. It's been shown in many different ways when it comes to the role of AI, most of all within education and teaching, is that we had the technology trigger. Hey, there's a new tool, it's ChatGPT, it will fix the world. And soon we got into the hype cycle where everybody needed it and it would replace all of us. And it would just be this tool that did everything. And suddenly we found ourselves in the trough of disillusionment when we realized it wasn't quite right and it often hallucinated. And actually, it wasn't the way to get the best engagement from many of our learners. And actually, it highlighted the need for our most human skills. And now we're busy moving through the slope of enlightenment to the, oh, sounds very grand, doesn't it? The plateau of productivity, where we'll be in a place where we can say, you know, these great things that have been shared really don't have impact and value in education. And these great things do. And we've found a way to effectively identify them and work along that journey. And as such, we see AI benefiting educators by reducing staff workload, helping us automate tasks, helping us do data analytics and summarization, helping us with personalized learning tools to support our students, developing adaptive teachers, and being support for our students with special educational needs. And that's something that's really important to, I think, to recognize as we move along our journey. So the evolving role of the educator, you know, again, very much try to keep things simple. We're there as human beings, cultivate those learning communities, prepare our learners for an AI-driven future, help co-design powerful learning experiences, partner in learning, and make sure that we can curate AI-driven content. All elements that fit together within the role of an AI educator. And I hope for you listening, you can sit and perhaps reflect on those and see elements where you can say, yeah, I can see that that's already something that I'm trying to do. That's why I'm listening and learning about some of these technologies and tools. This is something that I'm going to take a step further as part of my conversation. Now, again, there's lots of these different bits we're going to go through so that you've got a nice pack to take away as resources. Again, thinking about some of those bits that standardized there, it's about those changing roles, moving from instructor to facilitator sometimes. Maybe that's that sage on the stage becoming the guide on the side. Moving from that manual grading to using feedback more effectively from automated tools. That knowledge source to knowledge navigator. Again, you can read them, but it's about those subtle shifts. And I don't think it's about one becomes the other all the time. It's about having that nuance and flexibility within the classroom. And it kind of resonated nicely with me because those are all things that we're seeing around the world. And it linked in very nice with a graphic that Toddle was sharing before this event about separating and thinking about those changing roles between the teacher and students and within that shared space. So I see Kirsten's popped up on the screen. Did you have a question at that point?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes left, just so that you know how to wrap up.
Oh, 3 minutes. My goodness. Well, we're going to go at pace because thank you for that warning. I'm going to just flip through a couple of these bits here. I've got on my clock here about 5, but I will whiz through. So thinking about making sure we focus on that content deliverer, our learning roles. Again, these are summations of the points I've just shared. I always want you to be mindful of those challenges of making sure that we recognize we have an obligation as educators to fill that knowledge gap, recognize that legislation lags behind us. I've shared a takeaway for you, which is questions within your own schools you should be having about how you're using AI to support your learners. So there's a nice couple of handouts. I'm also going to give you a guide on how you can test and evaluate effectively. So think about places to show the evidence. Again, I've shared them, but more importantly, I've given you a really nice rubric. Separate when you're looking at those new tools between pedagogy. So the steps you think about, does the product align with the curriculum? Do you understand its intention? Have you looked at its purpose with the technical questions? And then from that, at pace, I appreciate, but don't worry, you'll be able to take it away about those steps of how you can go through an evaluation, get a vendor presentation, go to events like today, evaluate it, and make sure you're making decisions for the purpose. Finally, make sure that you're the feedback loop. This worked well, this didn't work well, this was the challenge. And then make sure you feed that into your digital strategy. So all the strands within your classroom and within your teacher journey is about how AI can be an enabler for each of those different strands as we move forward. Lots to cover, and I appreciate we've gone at pace. I have included some extra takeaways, but hallmark takeaway to remind you of your journey, and I hope they will all put you in the right place to move along on your exploration. And I guess the best one to end with is a little bit reminder of taking it forwards and all the different elements that build up your teacher journey when it comes to adopting AI safely and effectively.